please.
Okay. All right, I'm recording.
I'd rather trim off stuff than miss something.
Yeah, no.
Let's see. Check the old Hangout here. Make sure it's working. I don't know why I test this. It always works, but the one time I don't test it, it won't work.
Isn't that how it always works?
Or doesn't work.
Yeah, no kidding.
All right, just waiting for the lag. Okay, Google just bought Twitch, so maybe they can fix this lag issue with Hangouts.
Yeah, right.
You hear that? That's where it just came to. It's just to the part where I said I'd rather trim off.
Oh, wow. Yeah, it's a bit behind.
Yeah. I mean, this, like you said, Jonathan, this is Google. If anybody could crack this nut, they should be able to.
Exactly.
All right. Let's make this happen then.
Woohoo!
All right, 1, 2, 3, go. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Everyday Linux, episode 155. One ping only, please. Recorded August 10th, 2014, and brought to you by Element Opie Productions. ElementOpie.com. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the Linux show that's not about Linux, but about life in the context of Linux. I am your host, the Sultan of the Soapbox, Mark Cockrell, and with me, as always, are my stalwart co-hosts, Chris, the Gooey Kid Anderson, Chris, the Command Line Godfather Neves, and Seth, the Gooey Kid Anderson. Hello, gentlemen.
Good morning, sir. How or evening or whatever the time may be for the people in the audience. Welcome.
I would like to welcome the Element Opie faithful from near and far to another rousing rendition of Everyday Linux.
And with us, the silent one thus far, is our special guest for the week. Mr. Jonathan Nato returns, the grand poobah of the Sonar Linux distribution. Hey, Jonathan.
Hey, everyone. Thanks for having me on, guys. I appreciate it.
He said, hey, guys, would you tell everybody we've got a new release? And we said, no, you got to come do it yourself.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
We don't do that type of stuff here.
So up front, we need to apologize for the Linux content of the show.
Yes.
It's going to be a little
Sorry
much for
about
some
that.
people.
It's actually going to be a show about Linux, somewhat. So we're okay there. But before we get into the Linux stuff, we didn't tell you we were going to take a week off. We just took a week off. Oops, sorry about that. We planned it. We knew it was going to happen. I just didn't mention anything on the last show we did. So I was getting a few, not frantic, but concerned feedback from people, comments and emails saying, did you break something in the feed? What's the problem? I consider that a good problem. We've become so regular that people think something must be broken when we don't do a show. No, we just didn't do a show. But we're back and rested, I suppose, and ready to go. My family took a quick mini vacation. We went up to Chattanooga, Tennessee, which is just 90 minutes north. Ran up there, stayed in a hotel for 2 nights, and came back because my kid started school on Monday.
Wow.
Ooh,
Yeah.
That's early.
Yes, it is.
that's crazy.
Most places around here, they have 2 more weeks of summer break left.
Yeah. We the way they do it around here, it's a kind of a weird schedule, but I like it actually. They do only a 6-week summer instead of the 10 to 12 that most people get. And then every 6 weeks you get a week off. So they'll have a week off the 3rd week in September, and you get a full week off at Christmas, Thanksgiving, and then 2 weeks off at Christmas, and then a week of spring break, and then another spring week off. Every 6 weeks you get a week off. So the kids don't get so totally burned out, nor do the teachers. But, I have a stay-at-home wife, which is awesome, but if I had to round up daycare for those weeks interspersed throughout the year, I think it would make me nuts.
Probably.
Yeah, that would be pretty nuts. Yeah, but I mean, what a great idea. That's kind of proactive for your school district. That's entertaining.
Yeah, it's almost year-round school. The year-round school concept is similar to that. You go year-round and take frequent breaks. But this, I like it. It works well, but it does make for very short summers.
Yeah, I guess that's the handoff.
And I do want to jump in there that on the Monday, August 1st, I took that day off for kids' first day of school. I sent them to school, and then my wife and I took the day off, so that was awesome. And we went to see Guardians of the Galaxy with it. And
Yes.
a spoiler-free review. This is pretty much what I posted on Facebook. It's a lot of fun. Not necessarily a great movie, but a lot of fun.
Yeah, I'll second that. I actually got to watch that movie the day after release.
Nice. That's
I was
rare for
actually-
you.
It is. Usually I'm a couple weeks behind, so I was able to actually, me and my little brother, the weekend that we took off, I went up to Billings, which is a fairly big city for us, and we sat down and watched Guardians of the Galaxy and had a lot of fun. I will definitely say, be careful when you take your drinks of soda because you might be shooting it out your nose.
Yeah. Seth, have you seen it?
No, I have not. And I actually made a, normally what I do when I go see the movies is I look and I say, okay, there's the movies. Which one do I want to see that starts next? And I chose poorly this week. I went and saw Lucy. And if you have not seen Lucy, you consider yourself blessed and fortunate above all human beings. It was,
Oh,
the second it was over, I went, what a waste of time. If you think the premise is cool, this person unlocks more than 10% of their brain. There's a movie that came out a few years ago called Limitless with Bradley Cooper as the star. Much better.
And I didn't think that was a very good movie. So if it's much better.
There were a couple of visual elements, and I'm not just saying Scarlett Johansson's hot, that's a given, but there's a couple of visual things they did in the movie that's cool, but overall, it's like you take the normal plot of an action movie, knock off 25%, and then delete all the action, and that's what you're left with.
Okay.
So, that's my
I'm a little sad
spoiler-free
now.
review of Lucy.
Yeah, that is
I was
I actually
hoping.
saw someone talking about that, and I was like, that actually sounds like an interesting concept of a movie, but now I don't want to see it.
and Luc Besson is a great director. He did Fifth Element, one of my favorites. It seemed to me like it was going to be in the vein of Fifth Element, right? The perfect woman, the super female lead. He likes super female leads. He does lots of movies with hyped up women leads, and so I was kind of excited about that. And then I started listening to the reviews, and one of the things that that I always pay attention to is when a movie is coming out, the previews, the commercials, never. If they never have a reviewer, or if the press never talks about what a good movie it is, but they talk about the action and the suspense then it's like, all right, this is suspicious here because they didn't have any good comments that they could put in there. Second to that is when they will have riveting the New York Observer. Okay, that's not a review. That's a word out of a review. He could have been talking about the repairman riveting his seat before he sat down. And this movie had those pre-released earmarks that made me think, this may be a disappointment.
I mean, technically it was well done. It's just like, I think what they did was they took the scenes that were cut from the movie and made the movie out of that. And all the best scenes, some guy labeled this bin throw away and this bin keep,
They
and then
got 'em
somebody
mixed up.
came in and switched the labels.
So going
I'm
back to
hoping.
Guardians, we sort of glossed over that. Guardians is sort of a lesser known Marvel franchise, and I think it serves them well, because the one person I know who really didn't like the movie loved the Guardians in the comic book. So, it seems to be one of those movies where the more familiar you are with the source material, the less you'll like the movie.
Well, there was a Guardians in like the 70s and early 80s that bear like almost zero resemblance to this Guardians of the Galaxy. So back from my time in comics, this isn't the Guardians I knew, but I'm still looking forward to seeing it.
Yeah, I actually remember reading this book, this rag, as a speaking comic. This was actually one I did enjoy it back then, but it was never one of my always reading ones, so I wasn't as super familiar with the rag as probably your friend was.
Yeah.
But they hit the highlights that I remember from that book, so I had a lot of fun with it. And most of the time people will say stay for the after credits
Don't.
No, this was stupid. Don't even waste your time.
It's not worth the extra 5 minutes in the chair.
Yeah.
Although when I went into the theater, the person taking my ticket was like, "You have to stay to the credits. It's totally worth it." So it was built up even more. And this person is apparently a big fan of that franchise that they are pumping. And I won't spoil it because people are so sensitive to spoilers. I will say that I've heard a lot of people comparing Guardians of the Galaxy to Avengers. And it's true. It's Avengers without the movies leading up to it. Okay?
Yep.
And that's where you're missing. So the beauty of Avengers is that the only backstories you had to develop were Hawkeye and Black Widow. All the other backstories had been developed in previous movies. Guardians doesn't have that. So they have to take time to make you care about every character. So every character has their one Oscar-winning moment, as they would say in Wayne's World, and everybody gets their moment in the sun, and it becomes formulaic. It's like, okay, there's an action scene in Act 1. Now we have to have a heartfelt scene about one of the characters. Now action sequence in Act 2. Now we have to have a heartfelt backstory about another character. So in terms of just being a good movie, I give it a C-. In terms of being a whole lot of fun, when I get on a roller coaster, when I get off of it, I don't complain that it wasn't a good movie. And this was more like a roller coaster than a movie.
Right. I could see how that would work. Yeah, and I would agree with that. It was very structured, I guess is a good way of putting that. It was a very structured movie and you could read the writing on the wall all the way through.
The narrative was weak. The acting was fine. And it's a parody, and what's great about it, and this isn't a spoiler because it's one of the previews, there's that slow motion heroes walking thing, and one of the characters is yawning during that. So it's a send-up of all the movie cliches. But the problem is they do a send-up so well it actually becomes the cliche that they're parodying. So there's a little bit of that. That almost worked, or maybe it worked too well. However, let me back all this up to say it's a whole lot of fun. So
it's worth it's worth the money.
Totally.
And I was hoping to be able to see it in 3D. I missed it. We missed the timing for that one. When we went to see it, all we could see it is in what they called their Super D theater, which is a ginormous monster screen. And I was off-centered, so all the effects kind of. But it's definitely worth the time, and definitely worth the. I would say not a premium price, but definitely go see it in a big theater because it definitely helped.
All right, and before we leave the movie corner altogether, I saw Noah last night, Netflix DVD. I still get the red things in the mail. I'm the one. I'm the guy who still gets those.
Someone's got to hold that up there, Mark. Come on.
Yeah, not a good movie. Don't see it. Not even worth the Netflix rental. I mean, had I paid money for it, I would have been really mad. As it is, I just missed a slot in Netflix where I could have had a good movie.
Would that be on tune with Children of Men? Bad?
I don't know that movie, so I can't.
No, Children of Men
don't watch it.
had enough good that you could say, okay, that was okay. No, Noah, they need to do a Riff Tracks version of Noah, maybe, because it was just all around bad.
And I know that I'm coming at this from a fundamentalist conservative Christian point of view, but even if I wasn't that, I still would think it was just a bad movie. So it's a bad movie that jumps over into heresy several times. So even if I take my heresy hat off and try not to be bothered by that, the plot, the acting, the special effects are bad enough that it's still a bad movie.
Yep.
And it's a shame because I love Russell Crowe, and he rarely does a bad movie. But this was a bad movie, and he was bad in it. It's not that the movie was so bad he couldn't save it. He was bad in it. It's a shame, really.
Yes.
Okay, let's go on to something good. Weird Al is good.
He's always
good. There is a change.org petition to get Weird Al to be the Super Bowl halftime artist. And as of right now, it is up to 118,823 supporters. So, you know, I mean, granted, even if it gets up to the 150,000, there's no guarantee that they have to do this. But, dude, I think Weird Al would be an awesome halftime show for the Super Bowl.
Weird Al is by far, he puts on one of the best shows. Back in the day when I was younger, I've gone to numerous uncountable heavy metal shows, music shows, you know, you name it, and I've just been to so many of them. And probably 8 or 9 years ago, Weird Al was playing at this fair near the town I lived in. And I was like, awesome, we can see Weird Al. It's going to be cool. We went and saw him, and I was blown away. He was by far one of the top 5 shows I've ever seen in my life. He was amazing live.
Yeah, he surrounds himself with a great group of musicians who can not only play any song but can play it as a polka.
Yeah, the
Yes.
first song they played. I think it's one of the songs on one of his albums, but I never heard it before. It was this slamming polka song. He came out with the accordion, and they were rocking out, and I was like, "What in the world is this?" I couldn't believe it. I was blown away. It was totally amazing. And then in between each song, this was This is one of the crazy things that he does in the show, is there were 2 giant screens on each side of the stage. Not that I could see them, but in between each song, they were playing clips of UHF. And so after every song, he would run backstage and get dressed in a completely different outfit for the next song. It was crazy.
Oh, wow.
I can't even remember her name. The chick who does that, who wore the meat dress. What's her name?
Oh, Lady Gaga.
Lady Gaga.
Oh yeah. But yeah, he the song would end and he'd run backstage and hurry up and get dressed. And like I said, you know, when he played Fat, he came out in like the fat suit, and it was so crazy. But like I said, by far top 5 best shows I've ever seen. He puts on an amazing show.
Cool.
By the way, how sad is it that meat dress is what got us to know who I was talking about?
Yeah, right.
That's pretty sad.
That sounds about right, though, for her.
One quick note of apology: I suck at Patreon. Sorry, those of you who've just been super awesome and gone over to elementop.com/Patreon and subscribed and said, "I will pay you money for your shows." I haven't been putting shows up there. I forget to do it. The show episode 153 3 weeks ago I put up but didn't put a link to the show. 154 I didn't put up until today, 2 weeks after the fact. I suck at Patreon. I'm sorry. I'm going to try to get better. But it's one other thing that I have to add to my steps, and I forget it. So thank you for the Patreon love. I'm sorry I suck at it.
So, Mark, you need to figure out a way to script it.
Well, I would love to do that, but they don't offer it, and their website is entirely JavaScript driven. And so everything happens real time on the website. There's no way I can't even do it from a mobile platform. So even if I forget, I can't whip out my phone or my tablet and do it. I have to wait till I'm at a desktop PC. So anyway, it's I can complain about their platform, but it's my fault. So I did get my first disbursement of a couple of bucks, and they took a pretty big chunk out of it. But that's okay. I wanted to say 2 things. You know, thank you for being a supporter. If you want to be a supporter, please do. Second, I suck at it, and I'm going to try to get better.
Well, at least you're going to try.
I'm going to try.
That's the good part.
And one other thing before we leave: be careful what you eat and what you ride, and the combinations thereof. Right?
Yes. This weekend marked our county fair, which in small Bumsville, Montana, a county fair is a big thing. Which
That's good
I
fun
almost
parenthood right there.
It is. It's awesome, right? I almost got my daughter to puke, and I almost got my son to puke. So I thought that was a pretty good mix of almosts. But
Right.
to make the night, to make the night better, my children didn't lose their lunch, but I almost had a friend of ours who was with us. She was all saying that she's never going to puke and never going to puke, and just bound and determined that she's never going to do it. We got done with the spinning apples after the carney told us to stop spinning, and she went from very well tanned looking person to a white sheet in about a half a second. It was the best ever. And the eyes rolled back in her head a little bit, and it was just that moment of he didn't know if he needed to duck and cover or point and laugh.
Yeah.
But she ended up holding her lunch down. But yeah, it was great fun. I can't wait till next year because I'll double my efforts. Maybe I'll squish him in the scrambler.
The one time I ever puked on a ride wasn't because of the ride. I was 6, and it was that the spinning swing thing.
Yep.
You know, nothing super fancy about that. I was just sick. But that's the one time I've ever puked on a ride. Lots of people have tried. I love the things. I'm an adrenaline junkie. Nothing bothers me. My brother and I once had a competition to ride at Six Flags in Texas. They call it the spindle top. It's the thing that pins you against the wall as it spins. Yep. And we had a competition to see who could ride it the most back to back. We were there on an off day, so we were able to do that without getting sick. And he puked, and I won. I think we rode it 7 times in a row.
See, we never did the whole test of how many times you could ride that ride in a row because the line's always too long for us. Yeah. But it was how many sit-ups could you do while you were pinned to the wall?
Oh, wow.
That's what we did as adrenaline junkies for us, man. When there was a couple of times, I would watch kids pound 30 push-ups out and then get off of it and fall over because their muscles just couldn't handle the strain anymore. But it was pretty fun. But we were just talking about rock and roll song or shows, and I can honestly say that Buck Cherry, if you've never heard of them, you probably don't care. But Buck Cherry came to Little Town Glendive and rocked everyone's socks off. It was a great show. My hat's off to Buck Cherry and the people that brought him to Glendive. Even with all of the there were enough protesters in the paper and things of that sort that made me laugh wholeheartedly when I was reading their whining and complaining in the paper.
All right, so let's move on now to something else that's not Linux. Listener feedback part of the show. As I often say, I'm not afraid of taking criticism, and in fact, I give you the front of the bus. You get to ride first. Jerry hates the show, but loves Seth. So Jerry writes, after listening to your podcast a number of times, I'm left with the impression that you don't like Linux and you do like Windows. I would think that a show with Linux in the title would be pro-Linux, unless the title specifically communicates otherwise. Also, a show about, quote, life in the context of Linux is technically, quote, about Linux. See the definition of, quote, about. So, be honest and call yourself the, quote, poo-poo Linux and praise Windows show. Also, as you should know, there is a show called Dev/Random that publishes shows at random times. It seems you've stolen their name prematurely, as that show is not officially dead. And I've already heard several episodes, and I've heard that they have several episodes in the can that have yet to be published. I think of the personalities on the show, I enjoy Seth the most and recommend that he bail on EDL. So, wow. Jerry, I was going to call it the Poo-Poo Linux and Praise Windows show, but the URL was taken. So we had to settle for Everyday Linux.
I just got one comment for Jerry.
Wait, no personal attacks. All right.
Just one.
No, okay, just make it civil.
Sure. Of course. I don't want to run away another listener. Come on now, guys. I'm not that bad, am I? But I never once said I like Windows. Ever. If someone can point me out to a point where I actually say I like Windows, I will eat a ghost pepper on the show.
Nice. Oh, man.
I will get my editing chops in order just to produce that. You'll be wearing 3 different shirts. I like Windows, but that's okay.
No. It has to be real, not fake or photoshopped or audio chopped.
No, see, you didn't qualify that. You missed your chance.
So, Seth, are you going to start a Mac podcast soon without us?
Man, when I wrote, I'm sorry, when Jerry wrote this,
the truth be told.
No, dude, we have bashed every OS conceivable on this show, including but not limited to Mac OS X, all incarnations of Windows, and various flavors of Linux. So, I mean, first of all, there's just that. And hopefully, although it doesn't sound like he understands the difference between shtick and actual bashing. Number two, the dev/random, that's part of the file structure of the Unix variations of OSs. So, if somebody else has that, but I looked up the dev random podcast and the last one was like almost a year ago. So I don't know if they're still alive or not. But
and
honestly,
besides that, it's not the name of
them.
the show. It's the name of one section of the show.
Yeah.
So, I'm sorry. I'm just going to say, the only thing I'm going to say, Jerry, you're welcome to have your opinion. And I'm fine with that. You're welcome to not like the show. You're welcome to not listen to the show. You're welcome to listen to the show and complain about it. All of those things are completely within your rights. But if you have to write a piece of comment that tells somebody to look up the definition of about, you're walking the jerk line. That's all I got to say.
Hey, you told me I had to be civil. Come
That
on now,
was
Mark.
civil. I just
that
told
was
him he was walking a
borderline.
line. Exactly.
He didn't say he was all the way across it. He just said he was walking it.
And
I'll say it.
But because
No way
Mark
across
said
the
it,
jerk
it
line.
was mean, hateful, and
Yeah.
evil. I could have said it and it would have been fine because everybody loves me, apparently.
it's just not everything has to be for everyone. And I don't understand why Jerry would go out of his way to send me an email and tell me that he doesn't like my show. I don't write everybody who sells Brussels sprouts and tell them that I don't like Brussels sprouts. I just don't eat Brussels sprouts. So, Jerry, if you're listening, and I guess you're probably not based on the fact that you think this is a terrible show, I honestly would like an answer to that. What makes a person decide that they need to go out of their way to write on a piece of email to somebody to tell them that they don't like something they do? I need help with that. I need help understanding it. And that was cheap of me, and I apologize for calling you a troll.
I'll still do it, you troll.
Maybe Jerry feels like there was a bait and switch, and he says, "Oh, Everyday Linux, awesome." But then he listens to a few episodes and says, "I only heard 10% of Linux."
Which is why we put that right at the top of the show. It's not about Linux.
Oh, well. Anyway, that's enough airtime for that one.
Yeah.
Let's move on.
And Alec pretty much has his own show in this notes, but I decided to go ahead and put it in there because we didn't have much. He weighs in on our last show, 9 Advantages of Open Source. He says, "Hi, I just finished listening to episode 154, and I just want to make a few comments regarding the slides from 9 Advantages of Open Source. This rant combines the whole gist of the presentation, so just bear with me. When talking about reducing cost, as Chris spoke about licensing is a difficult subject. While OS software doesn't usually require a commercial license, it does happen. Licensing needs to be case by case, needs to be a case issue. For those that don't require a license, those projects generally live off of support contracts. In my humble opinion, any commercial use should be paying through support contracts. So with Seth's example of a business relying on one person's hobby project is wrong. If that person gives up on the project, business has nobody to blame but themselves. If they didn't give to the project via donation or support contract, the maintainer owes them nothing. But one benefit of the code being open is that the independence from one single vendor. Anyone can read the code base and could potentially provide support, not just the company that originally released the code. This creates competition based on the ability of the vendor. Depending on a number of available vendors, support costs could be handled internally and could be comparable to proprietary software. If you're in the business of producing software, there are advantages to using open source. An internal application composed of many open source applications is significantly less costly to maintain than one built from closed source components. Open source makes it possible to find developers with the skill set instead of farming off work to a single vendor. You'll also reduce the ramp-up time for new developers as the same components tend to be used. As an example, in the Java world, most applications are built using Spring, Hibernate, and Apache Commons. You don't need to reinvent the wheel. Your team can focus on using open source components to create in-house applications without starting from a blank canvas. The alternative is to instead pay a team of developers a bespoke component in-house or buy a commercial component that you can't customize. If the code is 99% of what you need, you're able to add any missing feature, but if you do, you'll need to contribute back. If you don't, end up making a fork of someone else's code. In a business that only consumes open source projects unmodified, licensing costs will likely be the only difference. As an example, compare the cost of running virtualized web servers running IIS versus a LAMP server. There will still be support costs. The point about security is fairly ridiculous. While it's possible to audit the code and contribute patches, almost nobody does. It's a sad fact, but aside from the few notable exceptions, the majority of open source projects are very small teams. Open source doesn't inherently benefit security. The same practices that apply to proprietary code equally apply to open source. As for the slide, you won't be forced to buy upgrades, I shall simply state that you won't be forced to upgrade as often. Seth stated installing Ubuntu 9.4 is possible. Sure it is, but the repositories have been offline for some time, so unless you don't need anything outside what's on the CD, an upgrade is still necessary. Thanks, and keep up the work. The great work, excuse me. So Alec there kind of went through the whole show, said some things that we had said. Frankly, Alec, I think you made some assumptions in there, that I think the article itself, and I can't remember now what they were because I was reading and not making notes, but I think one of the problems with the source article and pieces of your comments, and I wish I could comment on them specifically, is that there are some assumptions built in, and I think that sometimes those assumptions get us in trouble.
Yeah.
And if you guys want to say something, I'll go back and see if I can see what one of the things was I was talking about.
His thing about licensing, one of the assumptions of the article is just that you don't pay any licensing costs, and I'm running off this from memory here, so that way, therefore, it's cheaper versus paying money for closed software. And what I'm saying in response to him is, if you're paying money to the open source community, then that negates the savings of paying money to a closed source product. So, and one of the advantages of open source is it's cheap because it doesn't cost anything. Well, if you're going to pay for it, then that's not an advantage. You're simply paying to a different thing.
So here's the line that got my attention there. It says, an internal application composed of many open source applications is significantly less costly to maintain than one built from closed source components. That's one of the same kind of statements that the people who wrote the article would say. That's not necessarily true. All of your closed source components could be free. There are lots of free closed source stuff. So just because it's open doesn't necessarily mean it's going to cost less than closed. It probably will, but it may not. When I was, in my previous job in the school system, I ran my ship on both free and open source components. They were not necessarily one and the same. Many of the things I used, fundamentally, things that like VMware Server, for example, is not open but free. Didn't cost me anything to use it, but it wasn't open. So it's easy when you talk about these things to get caught up in these mindsets of, since A is true and B is true, C must be true. But we are assuming that A is true and B isn't always true, and so we're trying to support our points off of things that may not be true. And it's a difficult thing to avoid. And I don't blame you, Alec, because you're just a guy commenting to a podcast. But the people who published an article, the quote-unquote journalist, he's the one I would excoriate and did excoriate for doing that.
And I can't say anything better than that. You guys pretty much nailed it to the wall.
All right.
Love to excoriate people.
People are running for their thesaurus right now. And Jim comments on web browsers. I'm not sure what brought this up. I couldn't tell what he's referencing to. He didn't reference a show, but it was interesting. He's an old Linux guy, an old network guy. So Jim says, I started interneting with a shell account at VNet in Charlotte, North Carolina. Archie to find files, NCFTP to drag them back to the server, Zmodem to pull them home to Telex. I added a winsock.dll and packet drivers, etc., so I could use NCSA Mosaic, which was a free download. When Netscape became the hot thing, I alpha tested version 2A5, yawn. It then took me 3 tries to download IE because 13 megs of code by Z modem at 14.4 KB was pretty error prone. Start the download, then go to bed. By the way, like everything out of Microsoft, IE was Mosaic with a different throbber up in the right corner. IE through IE6 was based on Mosaic. 7 through 9 are bent Gecko, and 10 is bent WebKit. I started playing with Linux in 1995. I have the 95 Yggdrasil, I'm assuming that's a distribution, disk set. Had dedicated Linux computers in 97 and dumped Windows entirely in 2007. I'm writing on a Lenovo IdeaPad Z570 running LMDE Mate and Compiz 5 desktops. I have a pentagon instead of a cube.
Nice.
So Jim is an old dog. I never used. I mean, I used some of those things. I remember Z modem. I was a Lynx guy. I would log into my university account and use Lynx, LYNX, to jump from place to place, and then Gopher to pull things up and down. But yeah, that's going all the way back in the days where you dialed into somebody else's system and used their system to get on the internet.
Yep.
Yggdrasil Yggdrasil, as it is pronounced, is the world tree in Norse mythology, and they were the first company to create a live CD Linux distro. So go Yggdrasil.
I thought that was Knoppix who was the first to do that.
No, Knoppix just ripped them off in much the same way Apple ripped off the iPod.
In much the same way we rip off Real Linux podcasts.
There you go.
Right. No,
wait a
because
minute.
we don't bear any relation to a Real Linux podcast.
All right, and I have to stop real quick because my thing is doing the thing again. Hang on just a second.
You know, that always sounds so bad.
Yeah, it's more than a little annoying. All right, and here we go. And that wraps up our listener feedback section. This week in history, something happened.
Yes, October, I can't remember. I always get August the 9th, 1892. So we're going back in time. Thomas Edison receives a patent for a two-way telegraph. As you'll remember from our last show, I think it was 1837, the first transmission was demonstrated. But here is a two-way telegraph, Thomas Edison. This week in history.
So that's that's where it all began. We talked about this in our History of Communication show. Those guys were really breaking ground. How can we send a pulse from here to there? And you know what? All we do today, by cell phones and satellites and fiber optics, is send a pulse from here to there.
Right.
Just really fast.
Yeah, lots of pulses. I don't have a good segue, so linuxacademy.com is a place where you can go and learn about how to be a Linux guy. We don't care about Linux here, so we'll be having an ad for Windows Academy next week. But at linuxacademy.com, their goal is to take you from being a guy who knows something about something to a guy who is a Linux administrator, certified, certifiable, and ready to roll. And they do this by way of step-by-step video courses. And, I've done the spiel before. I don't feel the need to go through all of it again. There's lots of cool stuff there. You got your videos. You got your study guides to go with the videos. You got your practice quizzes and practice exams. They're all laid out in an organized fashion. And as I've said before, these guys are always adding to stuff. They're always growing and doing new things. And they're adding new content that is, not just Linux anymore. I mean, it's sort of Linux adjacent. Most recently, they added a OpenStack Essentials course that's online, complete, and ready to go. So, OpenStack is sort of the big thing these days. It's Linux. You need to know your Linux to do it, but OpenStack is the way to spin up virtual environments. And if you need to know how to do that, they now have a course on that. And these courses are all certified, good quality content. In fact, the LPIC and the EITIA folks No, CompTIA folks have certified their content, and you can even take their quizzes from their website. There's a partnership there that you don't get for just any fly-by-night guy doing YouTube videos. And I say all that to say that this is legitimate stuff, and you can get this legitimate stuff. You can try it out for only $14 days for $1. So for the first 2 weeks, give them $1. That opens the door for you. You look around, you can look at the videos, you can look at the notes, you can test out the forum, you can see if it's your thing, see if you like it, and at the end of the 2 weeks, if you like it, and I know you will, you'll convert to the $25 monthly pass. $25 a month for all this great stuff is a bargain. It's cheap. But you can even get it cheaper than that. If you've done it for the 14 days and then you trial the $25 month just to make sure, once you're ready to commit, sink in a year's worth of content, and you can get it for $19 a month. When you go, use the code EverydayLinux to let them know that we sent you.
Yeah, I just want to say, and one, this is really awesome, and you need to do it if you want to get in the information technology field. There are lots of boot camps out there that you pay a lot more money for, and they try to take all this information and cram it down your throat in a week. And in order for those boot camps to be effective, you already need to know the material. The boot camp is designed to fill in the minor gaps you have and package it all up so that you can go pass a test. If you know how to watch a YouTube video, do you know how to turn on a computer and access a YouTube video? If you know that much, you have all the qualifications required to start these courses, and you can take them at your own pace. It's not like you're watching a 2-hour lecture from Mr. Monotone. They're broken down into simple, easy to digest, small portions. If you don't understand something, watch it again, go through it, stop. And I don't remember if you said this week or not, but the study guides they have are time-coded to the lessons, so there's study guides you can read. And at the end of the course, if you already know computers, maybe you can bust it out in a month. If you already, are good with Linux, you're good with the command line. But if you're somebody, hey, I can turn on a computer, I can go to a web page, I know how to make sure my computer's online and stuff like that, it might take you a few months to get up to the level where you can pass the LPIC or the Linux Plus. And once you get those qualifications under your belt, you're not like Command Line Ninja, but you were somebody who is well qualified to get a systems admin position working on Linux, and then you can continue your relationship with the Linux Academy, growing and refining your skill set, and then you can become a Command Line Ninja.
But not the Command Line Godfather. That position's
That's right.
already taken.
Yeah.
It's filled. It's mine. But you can learn a lot from them. I like the fact that they do go through things, and like Seth was saying, and show you both the GUI and the command line way of doing things. Because you never know when you need to use, your Access and crashes or your SSH DIN. These guys know their stuff. Definitely go give them a listen.
All right. Thank you, Anthony and folks at Linux Academy for supporting Everyday Linux. Now, on to Sonar GNU/Linux 2014. I said to the guys I wanted to treat this like a distro review because what's interesting, Sonar is, and I'll let Jonathan expand on this. Sonar is designed for those who need special access, the limited sight, the blind, the what else, Jonathan? Who else do you cater to?
Quadriplegics, dyslexia.
There you go.
Every type of disability.
There you go. So that's what it's designed for. I wanted to see if our command line Godfather and our GUI kid could put it through his paces and see how it is for a regular guy too. Could you get a distro that the blind husband and the sighted wife can be happy about? Let's find out. And so that was the idea here, and we have the benefit of having not only the blind husband but also the developer of the distro here with us. So every insulting thing we have to say, he'll get to respond to directly. Awesome.
Ooh.
So Jonathan, just give us the 90-second pitch. What is Sonar, and what is your mission with it?
Sure, Sonar is focused on assistive technology or adaptive technology, accessible computing, however you would like to word it. I'm cater to every possible disability that I can and give access to people that otherwise can't access a computer. There's a billion people in the world with some type of disability, and I want them to, all of them, to be able to use Sonar.
You didn't even need 90 seconds, did you? So
No.
what is Sonar built on?
It was Ubuntu based, but I've now switched over to Manjaro, which is actually a Arch Linux derivative. So basically, Sonar is now a sort of a Arch Linux derivative, which is fantastic.
And so I assume that means there's no such thing as an update anymore.
Yeah, basically, once you install Sonar, you can just keep moving on up, and there essentially is no reason to have to put in a disk again once you put it in the first time.
So that's awesome.
Because that's the
what was the driving force to do that?
Well, like I said before, we are Ubuntu based, and the last version of Sonar that we released based off of Ubuntu was 13.10. And you know, a few years ago, before Unity came into the scene, Ubuntu was always known for being the distro shipping the latest version of GNOME, which is great. But since they switched over to Unity, they're releasing newer packages that had kept slipping. So when 13.10 came out for Ubuntu, they were already a whole full GNOME release behind. I believe at that time GNOME 3.10 was out, but Ubuntu was only shipping with 3.8. But they were shipping with GNOME 3.8, but with Orca 3.10 or Nautilus 3.6, and all the package numbering was like all over the place. And I was just like, this isn't good, you know, because some of the older packages had accessibility bugs in it that weren't ironed out. And so if they had the newer packages, those accessibility bugs wouldn't exist anymore. And so with all the packages all over the place, I was like, I need to find something else to use. And so I was considering Debian, but that was going to be a lot of work to do it the way I wanted to do it. And I had been hearing more and more about these Arch Linux derivatives. And I looked at Manjaro, and I saw on their page that they had community versions of Manjaro. And I was like, huh, that's interesting. So I managed to find an email address of the project leader, and I emailed them, and I just said, hey, you know, this is who I am. I developed this distribution, and I explained to him, you know, what I wanted to do. And I said, I see that you have community versions of Manjaro. Would it be possible for me to make a community version? And within a few hours, Phil, the project leader, emailed me back and said, absolutely, let me know what we need to do to start working. And so Phil has been fantastic to work with. He's done a lot of work, helping me with his build system for Manjaro. He's done a lot of work making sure I get particular packages that I need in Manjaro. He made sure that the installer for Manjaro was completely accessible, because at the time there was a lot of things that weren't accessible. And within a few weeks, he went ahead and fixed all of that. And Phil has just been an outstanding example of how you should work with other people when it comes to working in free and open source software.
All right. So how long has this new Manjaro version been out?
Probably like a few weeks now.
And what has the response from your community been to it?
Everyone is ecstatic about it, because the great thing about Manjaro/Arch Linux is now we always have all of the latest and greatest packages within the operating system. So basically running Manjaro, we're 7 days behind whatever Arch Linux is running. So we pretty much have the bleeding edge of everything, under Manjaro. So everyone is loving the newer version.
Well, bleeding edge can also be messy. What are you doing to mitigate the dangers of running so bleeding edge?
Sure, and this is what's great about what Phil has done with Manjaro. So the package manager in Arch Linux is called Pacman. And what Phil has done is he has put his own patch in the Pacman, and there's now 3 branches in Manjaro. So there's the unstable branch, the testing branch, and the stable branch. And what happens is Phil wrote a script that basically clones the Arch repos every day, and then he pulls them over into his Manjaro repos. So if you're running the unstable branch, you're basically running 1 day behind whatever Arch Linux has. So after the unstable, after everything goes in unstable, you wait 3 or 4 days, everything gets tested. If it gets a clean bill of health, the package then moves up to testing. And then they make sure there's no bugs in there from testing. And after 3 or 4 days again, if it gets a clean bill of health, the package then moves to stable. So there's a 7, 8, 9, 10 day cushion between the unstable branch and stable. So by the time everything trickles down to stable, you're pretty much guaranteed there's going to be no breakage in your system, which is important for people that have disabilities because they might not have the access they need in order to fix a broken system. So having that 7 to 10 day cushion is exactly what we needed to assure stability.
Yeah, it's an awesome way of doing that.
So, because Arch, I don't want to say Arch, throws their packages over the wall, but they let you know, like in their wiki or their homepage, oh hey, by the way, you have XYZ installed, you better make sure you change the .conf file, and you're gonna have to move this folder over to this this folder over here, and so they let you know your system's gonna break unless you do something. But not everyone running Sonar is gonna want to do things like that, so that's why using Manjaro is fantastic.
Cool. Now, let's back up a little bit to give a little context. You were here before. We talked about Sonar before. You are a formerly sighted person. You lost your sight in an auto accident, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, at the age of 14.
And so you are living with the fact that the world is not an accessible place. And
Absolutely.
instead of just whining about it, you decided to do something about it. And
Yes.
you began as an advocate and then became a distro maintainer.
Yeah, exactly. I do have a couple of new people on the Sonar team now, which is awesome. So I technically am not the lead developer anymore. Kyle Broward is, and he's taken on a lot of the day-to-day stuff for me. And now I've moved on to being able to reach out to organizations and really try and bring awareness to Sonar and try to get, schools for the blind. There's an agency in Boston I've been working with to use Sonar there for their blind and low vision users. So that's freed up my time to really start pushing Sonar forward to, like I said, agencies and other places like that.
So what's the difference about Sonar as opposed to just grabbing Arch and sticking Orca on it?
Sure. Well, Arch is a whole can of worms on its own getting that installed. So, it could take you half an hour. If you're well versed in Arch, you could probably get up and running in half an hour. But if you're not, it could literally take you 2 hours just to get a system kind of up and running and halfway usable. Manjaro has done to Arch what Ubuntu's done to Debian, like Debian back in the day. So Manjaro is very easy to install, has a live session that it boots into, and then you click on install, and it goes through a whole GUI installation just like you would see on Ubuntu. And after 20 minutes or so, reboot, and boom, you're in your system. With Arch, it's a much more I don't want to say sophisticated install, but you have to manually type a whole bunch of commands into the command line. You have no desktop environment, no nothing. You have to almost install the entire thing from scratch.
Which is
That's like
Chris's
what, the
heaven.
third level of hell?
Or Shangri-La if you're the command line godfather.
Yeah, it depends on where you want to go with it.
Yeah. I mean, it's extremely flexible, Arch Linux, and if you know what you're doing, it's a great way to install your system. But if you're a new user, you probably don't want any part of Arch Linux.
Yeah, I'm not a new user, and I don't want any part of Arch Linux. So, Chris,
Arch
Seth,
isn't
did
that
you guys
bad.
have a chance to play with Sonar this week?
Yeah,
I did
have.
not.
Okay.
Oh,
You
Seth, you're
fail.
on my list.
Yeah. So, Chris, tell us about the user perspective from a sighted user.
Sure. One of the first things that, and I'm sure it's meant to be this way, is the disjointed computer voice that I had to listen to
Yes.
for the install.
Which is the whole point of having something for a sightless person.
Right. Right, and I understood what it was for, and I understand that that's part of the whole thing. But when I wasn't expecting it, because I booted up my test box and walked away from it.
You said dirty words, didn't you?
No,
No.
it scared me because I had just before I had my computer on and I was listening. I had music pumping out of it, and then all of a sudden, this disjointed computer voice starts talking, and it scared me. I wasn't ready for it. But it's actually a very nice looking live install. For some reason, I ended up with a broken package somewhere where it wouldn't let me use the GUI install. I had to fall back to the command line version of the installer.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and
Yeah,
I,
I'm sure it was a broken package,
Yeah.
Chris.
It just
whatever.
knew it was you.
that's got to be it. Yeah. But even the command line version of the installer is a very smooth install. Did you write the installer for that, or is that the Manjaro?
Manjaro guys did that.
Okay. Even for being a command line, it was Ncurses based, I believe.
Yeah.
It was very, very simple to walk through to do the install. Anyone who's done the install in any of the newer versions of any Linux at this point, the new installers that everybody's running is the same one that they've grown to love with Ubuntu or Fedora or OpenSUSE. They're all about the same now, and this one is very similar. I was very impressed with how clean the install was. It was just a very nice system to install with. When I did boot it up, and I know that I'm going to get a little flack for this, but really, GNOME 3? Come on. I hate GNOME 3. You made me use GNOME 3.
Look, I was probably the biggest GNOME hater of them all in the beginning, like, all the way up to GNOME 3.8. I started to turn a corner a little bit with GNOME 3.8. GNOME 3.10 came out, and I was back on the bandwagon. And GNOME 3.12, they've made it so much faster and much more responsive. I'm not, I still have some problems with GNOME 3, but I'm more of a fan now when I finally said, fine, let me grasp what they're trying to do with this desktop. And there are a lot of some pretty cool things you can do when you try to put aside the way you used to do things and see where they're trying to guide you. And, obviously it's all about choice and freedom. And if you don't want to use it, you don't have to. But unfortunately right now, GNOME is probably the most accessible desktop right now for screen readers, that is. The other the other assistive technology that we offer on Sonar is desktop agnostic, so it doesn't depend. It'll work just as well on any other desktop, but really the Orca screen reader works really the best with the GNOME desktop. So that's why we ship with it by default. But we are also working on a Mate version, which should be out maybe in 3 weeks or a month. And the Mate team has been extremely helpful also with making sure they fix any accessibility bugs. And they've been working actually very closely with us, which is also awesome.
Wait,
hopefully,
hold on. Mate is Mate? That's the pronunciation of it?
I always say mate too, but just to be nice, I call it Mate because that's what I've heard it's actually pronounced.
Isn't that Japanese for I give up?
No, I think it's a South American thing.
Because I saw Bloodsport 15 times. And when the guy's on the mat and they're about to break his arm, mate is what he says.
Yeah, no, I
so,
hear ya.
So the cinnamon, the GNOME guy said, I give up. Mate it is.
That's funny.
But so there will be a Mate or Mate version out in, like I said, hopefully 3 weeks to a month. But yeah, no, Chris, I totally hear what you're saying. For the longest time, I was a GNOME hater. But like I said, once I started using it the way they sort of designed it and intended someone to use it, I can kind of see where they're coming from now. And if you start using it that way, your workflow does kind of pick back up. So, but I totally understand what you're saying now.
Yeah, and that's fine. And I'm on record as a GNOME hater. I did like GNOME for a little bit, but I grew up and learned that KDE was a little bit better for me. But I will say, I will agree that this current version of GNOME that you have on that after an update, man, that thing is smooth as butter. It moves so fast. Even I VirtualBoxed it as well, and I really restricted how much resources it had, and it still performed beautifully and surprisingly, to tell you the truth. I was expecting it to fall on its face a couple of times, and it just purrs.
Yeah.
So I definitely give my hats off to you guys. Orca Reader running in the background. Once you're used to that, I hope is there some plans to getting a better voice?
We're definitely working on trying to get a much better sounding voice. I mean, it sounds like it's like a robot from the 1980s or whatever, like typical computer voice you would hear like in a commercial from the 80s.
The old speak and spell.
Exactly. Yeah.
Speak and spell or Danger, Will Robinson. But for once I got used to the voice, even as a sighted user, this is a nice desktop, a nice install, a nice working machine. I really tip my hat to you and your developers. You guys really make this thing polished and smooth.
So, Jonathan, does your whole family use the same system?
My son does, but I just put my wife on. She's running 1404 Unity. So,
Why would
'cause
you
she-
do that to her?
I don't know.
Kidding.
That's spousal abuse. I have to report you now.
But I told her I was going to switch her over, but I'm always like doing stuff to her computer, and she just wants me to leave it alone. So, so that's why Unity's just still on. 'Cause I'm like, fine, I'll just leave it alone and not bother you. So if I have to do anything on her computer now, I just SSH into it.
There you go.
All right, so we've talked about the screen reader. Obviously, for a blind person, that's your bread and butter. But
Yeah.
you mentioned a lot of other disabilities there. Tell me about the other hacks that you've done.
Sure. So we also have screen magnification for low vision users. I need to update this on the Sonar. I have the page on there, but I don't link to it yet. There's a whole bunch of keyboard shortcuts that we have set up. So a low vision user can press, I believe it's the Windows key, also known as the super key, plus Control and the letter M, and that'll turn on the magnification. And then when they press those two keys and the plus or minus button, that'll zoom in and out the screen for the low vision user. So they can even turn on the magnification during the install. So they can even magnify the install to get that going too. We also have a font. This font is included, but it's obviously not turned on because not everyone would need it. But it's a font for people with dyslexia. So they can go into the fonts and just switch over the font to the font for people with dyslexia, and it switches the whole, the entire system's fonts over to this font to help people, be able to read icons and menus and stuff like that better.
I just started to ask you what that looks like and realized what a dumb question that would be.
Yeah, I actually can answer that because when I stumbled onto this, I was like, how does that even work, switching a font? So I actually did a few days of homework on it. So essentially what it does is when people have dyslexia, and obviously there's varying levels of it, but generally speaking, when people have dyslexia, their brain turns the letters like all which way. So nothing makes sense. So what this font does is it makes the bottom of the letter, they call it heavier. So it's a little more like bold and like thicker on the bottom. So it tells the person with dyslexia, it tells their brain, don't move this letter. This is how it's supposed to be.
And it works? I'm looking at it now. I Googled it, opendyslexic.org.
Yes, that's it.
Yeah. And it's also, looks like it has some, you can make block letters out of it. Maybe I'm just quickly Googling the site. But
yeah, they have like bold italics and all kinds of stuff that you can include.
So just by altering the style of the font, that helps people with dyslexia?
Apparently, yeah. And a lot of people say it does work. So
Fascinating.
Yeah, it is.
Very
It is
cool.
really interesting. Yeah. So that font is included. It's already installed on Sonar. You just need to switch to it. We also
And it's not an offensive font at all, by the way. I just want to say, as a person who is normally sighted and whose brain works relatively normally, this looks similar to Comic Sans, really. It's not an unpleasant font at all. I could see my wife using this as her font because it's cute.
There you go.
So you got the magnifier, you've got Orca, you've got the dyslexic fonts. What else have you got?
We also have two on-screen keyboards. One of them is a very basic, just general on-screen keyboard like you would see, on an iPhone, iPad, Android, phone, whatever. Basically, that lets you, if person only has, use of one hand or even, a little bit of use of one hand, instead of using a keyboard, they can then use a trackball or a mouse and, click on the letters with the on-screen keyboard. But the other on-screen keyboard is much more sophisticated. So you could have paragraphs or other things like pre-populated. So you could type it once. So say if you're always putting in your name, address, phone number, things like that, you could type it once and then save it to a button. And so every time you push that one button, it'll then pre-populate the entire thing that you wrote once. So that way it cuts down on you having to, do the same thing over and over again.
I don't have any motor skill problems, and I want that.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, no kidding. I use LastPass to do that.
Exactly.
So.
Form filler.
And then we also have it's eye/head tracking software. So a quadriplegic with this software and the combination of the on-screen keyboard, what happens is when a quadriplegic will move their eye or even their head, when a webcam's plugged in, it'll track the movement and actually move the cursor on the screen. So then what happens is when you move the cursor on the screen, you can program the software to say, okay, when the cursor stops and there's like 3 seconds or 2 seconds or, you can put in the time you want. when it stops for this long, that means I want you to click on whatever I stop the cursor on. So a quadriplegic could totally control their computer and type out, documents. They could click on Firefox and surf the web. So granted, it may take a little more time, but it could be done.
Now, do you have people with each of these disabilities in your community helping you develop these things?
Unfortunately, I don't have too many, not people that I have testing it out, I myself or friends or whatever. I'll install a software and be like, hey, let's move your head around and just make sure it's, or fortunately, however you'd want to look at it. I don't have any real case scenarios where I have actual people using it yet, but that's with working with these organizations. This is going to come into play where I'll be able to sit down with some quadriplegics and really, sit down with them and be like, how can we make this better? Because, if I do it or if you do it, we're testing it out, but we're cheating because if it doesn't work, we'll just grab the keyboard and do what want to do. When someone can't cheat, that's where we're going to find out where the real bugs are and how we can make things better.
I love the passion in your voice. You're talking faster and more energetically. Obviously,
I always do that.
Yeah,
I try to slow myself down.
No, it's good. It's good. It's infectious. Obviously, this isn't something I've had any reason to be passionate about, and it's a sad reality that those of us who don't have a disability often don't care about the software for the disabled. It's a sad thing to say, but it's also human nature. Companies are the same thing. We were talking before we started recording. That companies, there's no financial incentive to alter your code for 1% of your audience. You're not going to see. There's no return on investment for that.
Right.
I wish we were all more altruistic than that, but we're not. I have a couple of times I've had blind people email me and say, this function of your site doesn't work with my screen reader. Could you do X?
Yeah.
And I didn't know, right? So I fixed it immediately, but I didn't take the time to go test my site with a screen reader. And so I'm just as guilty as everybody else because I didn't need it. It looks fine to me. I'm going to go with it. So, by the way, if you're a listener out there and you've got something you want me to fix, let me know and I'll see what I can do. And if I can't, I'll get Jonathan to do it for me.
There you go. And back to kind of what you said, Mark. A lot of people, when I talk to them and I start advocating about accessibility and stuff, they kind of have the same reaction, or I never thought of a blind person using my software. Or I never considered people with disabilities using a computer. And you know what? That's fine, because I didn't consider these things either until I was on the other side of the fence. If you don't live with it or know someone close to you that has a disability, honestly, it doesn't really kind of cross your mind unless someone brings it to your attention.
Yeah, I can see that too. Yeah.
So like I said, and that's why I try to talk about it as much as I can to bring that awareness. And maybe next time when someone's developing a website or their software, they might be like, oh yeah, I remember this guy talking about accessibility. Maybe I'll make sure my buttons are labeled right, or just little things like that can go a long way.
Right. So I don't know if you're set up for it, and I'm springing this on you. Can you play us a sample of your screen reader reading something?
I can't now because I unplugged my system. I unplugged everything the way I had it. Remember when I talked to you before we recorded?
That's fine.
So yeah, unfortunately, I can't right now.
So before the show, we were talking, and he had it was all plugged in, and this speak and spell voice started reading at 300 words per minute, which is faster than I can think. The reason I wanted to do that is to show you that A, it's really cool that you can do that, and B, clearly there's work that needs to be done. Because that voice is terrible. And we all know that voice is terrible, but somebody's got to fix it, right?
Yeah, we're working on there's a voice synthesis project called Mary TTS, but I think it's also known as Open Mary TTS, and it runs on Java. These voices are much more real sounding. They're actually real people. We're working on a new speech engine to be able to tie into Mary TTS to work with Orca. So we are working on that. This way, using Mary TTS is a lot easier to create voices. Once you have the Mary TTS sort of software set up and you want to create a new voice, the best way to do it would actually to go to Gutenberg or something and start reading, one of the books off of Gutenberg, because what you're going to need to do is record 4 hours of audio And this can be a little tedious, this part, because you don't want to record any ums or ahs or, you know, coughing, or you want to try and get some pristine audio. So that's the first thing. So you want to record like 4 hours. But the reason why you want to use Gutenberg is because along with recording the audio, you then need to take each sentence that you say and put it on a text in a text file, one sentence per line. So you could then just cut and paste the Gutenberg book into a text file, break up the sentences, and then what you do is you take that text file, take your audio, and you run it through the Mary TTS software, and it compiles a completely new voice library with the voice that was reading the book. And voila, you have a new voice for Orca.
Dang.
Wow.
So, just out of curiosity, from things that I remember dealing with when I was back in the school district, how does your guys' software compete with something like Kurzweil?
It's just as comparable.
It's just as comparable?
Oh,
because
yeah.
I know at my school district, there's a lot of people that went to the Kurzweil program for a lot of their sight-challenged people. And I was just curious, you know, you say it's comparable, but I mean, this could put them out of business, couldn't it? Once you guys get a better voice.
Absolutely, and that's why I'm glad Kyle took over the lead development, because now I can start speaking with organizations. And there's a woman that I'm speaking with in Boston who she has had a lot of experience working with like school systems and the disability portion of school systems. She's a Harvard law professor, and so I'm starting to work with her now and trying to find a way to get into schools, because she's had a few students over the years that have had disabilities, and she's seen like how they've been treated and sort of, you know, shuffled through the school, and like, you know, if they didn't have money, then the student would suffer, you know, to get the assistive technology they needed. So I told her all about Sonar and what we can do and what the future could hold, and she is going to try to do everything she can to start trying to get me into school systems, because there are plenty of kids that don't have technology that need it, but there's no money in the budget. And so with Sonar, like there'd be no reason to tell any kid again, you know, we can't help you. As long as we can find a computer to put Sonar on, you'll have the technology you need.
That's awesome. And honestly, I hope you do put those guys out of business. They're a pain in the butt to deal with.
Well, it's that whole industry it's really sad too, because I mean, really, they charge a exorbitant amount of money for their software, and they're honestly taking advantage of people in people that are in situations they never asked to be in. You know, they're charging thousands and thousands of dollars for this software, knowing the individual can't pay it and nor ever could pay for it.
Right.
And they know that the school or the government or some other entity is going to pay for it, and so they charge thousands of dollars. And like I said, they just take advantage of people in the situations they're in, really.
Well, to be fair, that is sort of the American way. Healthcare does that. Business. My boss takes advantage of me because I'm in a situation I don't want to be in. You know, I don't want to be in that cube, but I'm there, so he makes me work. You know, I want to cut them a little slack there. They're filling a market need, and if they didn't do it, there would be nothing. So let's not criticize them too much while we're working to put them out of business.
I like it.
You know, technology changes and things replace people. I have this conversation all the time when people talk about technology eliminating jobs or whatever. Does anybody miss the gas lamp lighter? Does anybody miss the blacksmith? You know, we don't. Technology has moved on. Yes, those jobs are gone, but those people found other jobs.
Right.
You know, and if technology someday puts me out of a job, then I'll go find something else to do. You know, that's the way it goes. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to get on that rant there. This is about Sonar. I just
no problem.
I have a rant button and you pushed it. So, Chris, from a sighted user's perspective, you talked about the install, you talked about the desktop, you said it was really nice, even though you didn't want to like it, you did. We know Arch is stable, as much as we like to razz Arch about being difficult, these guys, the Manjaro project, have taken the difficult and made it simple. We love it when people do that. So you've got a stable rolling release. There are no updates anymore because Arch doesn't do that. They just, when something's new, it comes out, like you said, 7 days after it's declared stable, it's there. Chris, were there any negatives? And be picky. You're always picky about everything else. Let's not treat this differently.
Sure. I guess the very first thing that I ran into a hiccup with is because I'm not familiar enough with Arch to know the Arch specific command lines, and that was something that I really had a hard time with. But
Something I wouldn't notice at all.
exactly, but it's your personal preference. I did notice that there was a couple of software pieces that weren't installed by default, and that's probably more because of their licensing hiccups than anything else. But out of the software that I use day to day, it's all there. I was really surprised to see like Handbrake was built in. I didn't have to go looking for Handbrake. VLC was built in. It was installed automatically. I didn't have to install it. I didn't try to do any gaming on it to see if Steam would work, but I'm sure with a little fiddling with the installer, I'm sure Steam would be fine. I really didn't notice a lot. Like I said during my initial walkthrough, this is a really well done release, and my hat's off to the Manjaro guys for giving you such an awesome base to put your software on.
Yeah,
to build your project on.
Probably 75% of what you saw is more or less Manjaro, I would imagine. But you are right about the the command line stuff for Pac-Man. It's not intuitive at all. Like to install something, you have to type Pac-Man --S and then the name of the package you want to install. Like you wouldn't know that unless you read the Arch Wiki. So
right. And so for someone who's very not Manjaro / Arch familiar, it did take a little bit for me to get used to it. But I will say I'm impressed. I'm impressed enough that I'm going to go put Manjaro on a machine for just a baseline, so I have an idea of where your stuff is different from their stuff.
Yeah.
Because I'm very surprised with how well this system just out of the box performed.
I think unfortunately for you though, I don't think they have a KDE spin. I know they have XFCE, OpenBox, GNOME.
They do.
And
I went and looked. They do have one.
I wasn't sure if they had one or not.
Yeah, they do. They have they have XFCE, OpenBox, KDE, but I noticed they don't have my new favorite love, which is Razer QT, and which is what they just merged with Alex.
Yeah.
That isn't there yet, but they do have a repository to add it in second-handedly.
Yeah.
So I want to jump in here. Obviously Sonar is free. It's built on open source. There's no cost to it. Is there a support option?
Well, I guess if you do want to support Sonar, if you visited the Accessible Computing Foundation and you can make a one-time donation, or you become a member at $2 a month or $10 a month. All of that helps out Sonar being made. And there's various other things that we're working on right now. Another thing.
No, you misunderstood the question. I need help. Where do I go?
Okay. So if you go to Sonar GNU Linux, we have a mailing list. We have an IRC room. You can email us. So we try to be as accessible as possible. We also have a Mumble room, and we give instructions on how to set up Mumble. Mumble is installed by default. So we tell you how to go into Mumble and put in the settings you need to put in to join the Mumble room, and we can talk to you in there and help you out with any issues you might have. So we try to make ourselves available every which way possible.
Do you have any data on how many users you have?
It's been downloaded in 30 different countries. I don't know how many users there are, but it's in 30 different countries. The majority of them are a lot in Europe, Africa. There's been quite a few in Asia. So we're definitely getting all over the place. South America. So I think every continent except for Antarctica.
And so what kind of feedback have you had?
So far with the new release, like I said, it's only been out for a few weeks, but everyone that has installed it so far is loving it. They love the speed of it. They love that it's based on Arch now because, like I said, a lot of the people that are with disabilities that have been using Linux for a while have been crying out for an easier way to use Arch Linux. Like I said, there is a way to use Arch Linux, building it from the ground up, but not everyone wants to do that. And Sonar finally has bridged that gap for everyone to be able to get Arch up and running very quickly.
Great, Chris. Was there anything else you wanted to say before I end this section?
Yeah. No. The only really thing that I wish there's a way for us to reach out to get more people to help your community out. I'm really impressed with a lot of the stuff that I saw just in your section of the project and Manjaro section. Have you got any traction from Manjaro to maybe bring a couple of developers from their team to help you guys?
Yeah, well, I mean, they've helped out a ton. Like I said, with the installer, they worked on a ton of the installer to make sure that was accessible. Phil had customized the build system specifically for us to do certain things that we wanted to do. With the build system that Phil has put together, you can't pull packages in from AUR, which is the Arch User Repository, and there was quite a few packages in there that I needed. So I emailed Phil saying, "Hey, I need these 5 packages in the community repo." And within 15 minutes, he emails back and he's like, "Done." So they help out as much as they can. They even gave us our own spot on their forums. They've announced how Sonar, is part of the Manjaro team. So they've really embraced Sonar and do whatever they can to help us out, which is really, really awesome. And I mean, I didn't expect them to go the lengths that they've gone, and it's really great, the relationship that we have.
Yeah, that's awesome. And just because I don't have any other way to really contribute to your project, I have both my torrent programs running, seeding your stuff, because that's
nice.
the best I could do at the moment. So
Perfect.
We'll see what we can do for other things later.
Absolutely, yeah, that's greatly appreciated.
Yes, I find myself in sort of a hypocritical position here. I want Sonar to do well. I hope I never have to use it.
Yeah, that's understandable.
I'm with you.
Yeah. So, Jonathan, was there anything you left unsaid? Any question we didn't ask or any point we didn't hit?
No, just two quick things. I was going to say, in a week or two, we're actually releasing an accessible version of the Sonar version for the Raspberry Pi, also built off of Arch Linux.
Oh, cool.
And so what we're going to do there is we're taking an Arch Linux install, building it up, and then once we get it exactly the way we want it, we then DD the image off the SD card, and then we make that available for download, and then a blind user or any other user with some type of disability would then get the image on an SD card, pop it in the Raspberry Pi, and then boom, it's going to boot up into a talking desktop. And we're using the Mate desktop for that.
Cool. No installation necessary other than just copying it.
Exactly, yeah. You just copy it over, put the SD card in, to plug in the Pi, and then boom, it just is going to boot right into a talking desktop.
Yeah, I use the Noobs installers for my Pis, and it's the same way. You get what you want, and you just throw it on there. They do all the hard work. I like that.
Yeah, exactly. And then the one last thing, too, is if you visit sonargnulinux.com, you'll see it says computers for Sonar. I stole this idea from someone that was doing something like this a few years ago. So basically what the idea is, if you have a computer that's sitting around, it's a little bit older or whatever, and you don't want to throw it away, and you maybe have to pay money to get rid of it properly, and so it's just sitting in your closet or whatever, email us. There's an email address to email us and let us know, hey, I have this PC, here are some of the specs, here's my email address, and we're going to put you in a database. And then when blind users or any other type of user with a type of disability emails in saying, oh, I see that you're offering a way to get computers, I'm just kind of the middleman hooking up the two people. And, then the person who needs a computer will contact the person who has one. And I just ask that the person who's sending the computer to already install Sonar, just in case the user getting it has never done it before or never used Linux. And I just ask also that they just charge the person whatever the shipping might be. And then that way they can get rid of a computer and someone can get a computer that might not have one with Sonar already installed on it.
Cool. And the monitor doesn't even have to work, does it?
That's right. Yeah, so if they're blind, it doesn't. That's for sure.
Yeah.
Do you think you would be able to put on here what the specs should be of that? Because I'd hate for somebody to have, hey, I've got 5 computers, and then come to find out those computers, really aren't enough to run it well.
Yeah, I mean, they would have to be really old. I mean, even a Pentium 4 would run the Mate version of Sonar. I wouldn't say perfectly, but it would be usable. And especially if someone's never had a computer, like I said, it would be usable. So, Pentium 2s, Pentium 3s, no. But I mean, a Core Duo, a Solo Duo, whatever they call the Core 2 Duos, any sort of 64-bit dual-core AMD, all of that is going to run just fine. So
I stumbled into a good point there. This is a geek audience. Surely there are a number of cracked laptop screens out there that people aren't able to use.
Oh, yeah.
For a sightless user, that doesn't matter at all.
Oh yeah, I told a story the other day when I was fixing computers. Still, I had a customer that had a busted screen, and I was like, "Well, we could replace it." And he's like, "Nah, you know what? This one's a little old. Let's just get a whole new laptop." I was like, "All right, well, what do you want to do with this?" And he's like, "Keep it. Do whatever you want. Use it for parts." And I was like, screen doesn't work, but the computer still works. I ripped the screen off and used that thing for like 2 years with no screen. And everyone said it was the coolest thing. Like,
So you just had a big gap there in this case?
No, I ripped the entire screen off, so even the casing. So like it was just the keyboard to the laptop. That's it.
That's awesome. Yeah,
So,
so
yeah.
that's a good way to reuse that old equipment there. If you've got a cracked
Absolutely.
screen, I mean, obviously it's not going to help a dyslexic person or a low sight person, but if you've got somebody with absolutely no sight, they won't care, and it's a good way to get rid of something for somebody who can use it. I don't have any now, but when I was in school, that was the biggest problem. We had
Yeah,
a bunch
totally.
of them. Kids would smash the laptops. They weren't worth it. I'm going to call up my old school and say, hey, send these to Jonathan.
Yeah, like I said, we could totally just. I took, like I said, I took the whole screen casing, everything off, so it was just the keyboard. So it was pretty cool.
Yeah, I know a lot of the people who listen to the show have shops of their own. If you run into that, just keep the what was the website again?
It's sonargnulinux.com, and you'll see across the top it says "Computers for Sonar,"
There you
and just
go.
click on that, and you'll see the instructions right there.
Perfect.
It's the second tab.
Yeah,
Yep.
there you go.
Now, where is the donate button? I'm looking for it actively.
It's not on the Sonar page. You have to go to accessiblecomputingfoundation.org, which is my nonprofit that I run. That's what sponsors the work of Sonar being done, and along with like the Raspberry Pi stuff that we're doing too.
And then, I'm at the Accessible Computing Foundation. Where is the donate button?
You'll have to. It should be across like the top right hand side, I think.
I have home, contact us, news, resources, and social network.
Are you at? Is it theacf.co or is it Accessible Computing Foundation?
theacf.co.
Okay, that's why I don't have the buttons on that page. I'm actually taking down that page soon because I have recently discovered that Google does not index .co domains. So
Oh. Well, your Sonar GNU Linux links to that page, so you'll want to update that.
Yeah.
So it's accessiblecomputingfoundation.com.
.org.
.org.
I just threw it in the chat room if you want to
Yeah,
click on
or
it.
you could go to theacf.tk. That'll also bring you right to the .org website, theacf.tk.
Ah, there we are. Donate.
Yeah, so you can make a one-time donation, or you can become a member of the ACF for $2 a month, $10, $20 a month, whatever, however you'd want to, be a part of this and continue to make things like this happen. So
I just have to point out this
That's
is the
awesome.
first time that New England has come out when you said dollars. $2 a month.
$2.
Yeah. You've been hiding it well up until just then.
Massachusetts is getting to me.
All right, so I want to put a pin in that section of the show. Obviously, Jonathan, we love having you on because you have a great mic and you sound good, and that doesn't always happen. But this is a good project that like I said, I hope I never need it, but I want it there if I ever do.
I hear you.
And so awesome, Sonar GNU Slide. I would say let us know when the new version comes out, but that will never happen now that you're using.
Well,
Arch.
we will release like newer ISO images every time like a new GNOME version comes out. So we probably will at least do maybe 4 releases a year. So we'll do one when a new GNOME comes out, and then halfway through that we'll do another one. Just so if someone installs if it's the first time installing Sonar, they don't have to do 8 gigs of updates.
Yeah. The Element 816 in our chat room wants to know if the Indiegogo campaign is still on.
Oh no, that's been over since February. At some point in February that ended.
So, no.
Are you going to rerun it later down the road in order to, maybe spin up some more funding?
I don't know. I might. I'm speaking with a few companies that hopefully might be interested in giving some significant donations to Sonar or to really get it off the ground. So I'm hoping something comes of that, but we'll see what happens. Companies like to say things, but following through is another. So
Of course.
All right, so let's move on to our tech news part of the show. And Jonathan's going to hang out with us and apply his wry wit and insouciant comments to the show quick, go get your thesaurus. Look up what that means. And
We'll wait for you.
This first one is one that Seth is. It's been the talk of the tech news for a while there. Video contains audio whether you want it to or not.
Yeah, I just thought it was freaking cool. This is a little bit from, there's a Tech News World article, hundreds of different links to different stories, but they all say basically the same thing. Here's a little blurb about the research. Objects vibrate when hit by sound, creating a subtle visual signal that is usually invisible to the naked eye. The researchers sought to reconstruct the sounds causing the vibrations through the use of high-speed video cameras, lots of image filters, and an algorithm they developed. They use cameras that could capture 2,000 to 6,000 frames per second. And then the other times they use just an ordinary off-the-shelf digital camera. And there's several links embedded in this where, it'll play the YouTube video of inside the room, what it sounded like, and then what the recovered sound. And it wasn't perfect, but you could definitely hear what was being said, so it was kind of cool. And man, talk about that tinfoil hat just kind of goes down a little bit more over your head because there's no privacy now.
So the reason I thought this was interesting is this is sonar using cameras. It's recording the vibrations of sound waves, but not picking it up with a microphone, picking it up with a camera instead.
Yeah, I've heard. I came across a study a long time ago now, maybe like 10 years ago, where scientists were breaking down cells to the smallest amount they could, and they discovered that breaking a cell down as far as they could, it was almost like a sound wave. Like the cell in its smallest form was a sound wave. So I thought that was pretty interesting.
Huh? That is interesting.
You know what else is interesting? Malicious hackers, as if they were good hackers, trolling the Linux kernel with malicious patches.
Yes, there is this guy who has been attempting to flood the Linux kernel with busted patches that don't seem to work right. And he goes by Nick Kraus, and the goals aren't clear. Some people think, he's a black hat, but not very good. Other people think, maybe he's doing a thesis for a doctoral thing about it. But he's basically just flooding the Linux kernel folks with patches that aren't any good, and they're responding with feedback, that says, but he is apparently ignoring it, and there is no effort. And there's no proof that he's done any type of development work before. We've talked, especially that article, The 9 Things About Open Source, and security comes up here quite often, and I just thought this would be a good springboard to talk about Linux security. Here's anybody can submit a patch. I could submit a patch to the Linux kernel. That patch would be worthless because I wouldn't even know what to do, but I could submit it, and then there's people there who maintain it and look at the patch and see if it's valid and see if it's good. And so this was just an interesting news story about somebody just trying to flood. And then, there's some speculation on what is he trying to do. Is he trying to put in a backdoor in the Linux, or is he merely trying to document the process?
So there's a great quote from the article. It says, Nick has decided he wants to be a kernel developer, a laudable goal. He, however, has decided not to take any advice given to me by a number of other kernel developers on how to work on the kernel. So instead, he sends random broken patches to random subsystems in the hope of one will slip past a sleepy maintainer and end up in the kernel. So this sounds like one dude who's not quite all there, but it is an interesting revelation of a potential problem, right? So if somebody created a distributed botnet system to generate patches and submit them, they could overwhelm the patch maintaining system fairly simply. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean they're going to get any bad code in there, but that means that there won't be any good code getting in there either.
Right.
So it's interesting. I don't think it's anything to be worried about yet. You can put the tinfoil away for now, but you can't unring the bell. this guy has done this for whatever reason, and now the story's out there, and now people are going to do it.
Yeah, and it's just sad that it's going to happen now. Yeah. But maybe it's a good thing. Maybe it's a thing that because this point of problem has been pointed at now we'll see something maybe to do some sanity checks to any patch code before it is looked at human eyes. Yeah. You know, a sanity check or something that maybe will prevent your malicious type person or scripting bots from doing this.
Yeah, I'm sure Linus would figure out a way to thwart this type of thing. I mean, Linus Torvalds is like, you know, we talked about that movie, like using, you know, more than 10% of your brain and, you know, fully using all of it. I think when you use more than 10% of your brain, you get someone like Linus Torvalds. This guy is like so smart. He's like, you know, scary, borderline insane or whatever. I mean, when he was writing the Linux kernel, and one day he was like, you know what, all version control systems suck. I need to write my own. And in 2 weeks he comes up with Git. Yeah. Like that's just insane, you know. Like that's what this guy does, you know, on his off time, and so I'm sure he'll find a way to thwart this type of thing.
I worked with this kid when I was in school, this student, and his name was Ari. And if you're listening, Ari, hey, and I used to refer to him frequently as, he's not just smart, he's scary smart. He's the kind of smart you don't want to turn your back on, the kind of smart you're glad is on your side.
For real.
And, you know, I've worked with a lot of smart people. I am a smart people, or at least I like to think I am. This kid, at 15 years old, was running circles around me in every category. And, you know, it's one of those rare guys. You know, there's maybe 100 of them across an entire generation of people. And, you know, sometimes they use their powers for good and sometimes they don't. And I think some people would say the jury's still out on Linus. You know, has he?
Yeah.
Which way is he going to turn? He could still be turned to the dark side. But you know, we're all here on this Windows show because of him. So,
right.
I've never met the guy, but you know, just you can read his exploits and know that he's freaking amazing.
Yeah, maybe I'll try to line up an interview for him at LinuxCon. I'm sure no one else has thought to do that.
Yeah, his schedule should be completely empty. I don't think that should be a problem.
Well, you know, I'm the talent of the show, so he'll bend over.
You're the good personality. Yeah,
something like that.
Just make sure you show up at the right time, Seth.
Right.
Hey, maybe you should double check when LinuxCon is again. So
yeah, that was a good one.
Moving right along, Android is crushing it. 85% of smartphones shipped in Q2 were Android.
Wow.
That's awesome.
Yeah, 300 million smartphones shipped, so it's not like it was an off quarter and nobody bought a smartphone. You know, 300 million smartphones shipped, 85% of them were Android. That is redonkulous.
When do people start calling out Android as a monopoly or whatever? I mean, that's got to be getting close.
Well,
what's interesting is Android isn't a company. So
yeah, that's true.
You know,
yeah, it's true. You're right.
There's Google, there's Amazon, there's, you know, all the no-name Huawei tablets and all that sort of stuff. So Android is a monolith, but there isn't a single company behind it. There's AOKP and AOSP.
Yeah, that's true.
And so
Samsung ships like 84%, and you know,
right? Yeah, exactly.
Well, that's because they come out with a different SKU every day.
Right.
You know, here's the Galaxy S3.01, Galaxy S3.02. But you know, Android or Samsung is going with the spaghetti method: throw it against the wall, see what sticks. And frankly, I like that. If you've got the resources and they can crank out a phone for 8 cents, you know, why not? And it's working for them.
And it's looking like a lot of the spaghetti is sticking to the wall. So
yeah,
they really haven't come out with two, you know, maybe one or two phones that have kind of flopped, but it almost seems like a lot of them are, you know, received pretty well.
Well, no, it's more like they've came out with 1,000 phones and 10 of them have been awesome. So, you know, they probably have more misses than hits. But, you know, when you're shooting that often, you're going to hit something eventually.
So according to these numbers, 84.6% Android in Q2 2014, 11.9% iOS, 2.7% Microsoft, 0.6% BlackBerry, which is actually higher than I would have expected. I would have expected BlackBerry wouldn't have sold any phones in Q2 2014, and others,
Right.
being Tizen, are 0.2%.
This is worldwide, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and and here's the thing: Apple went from Q2 of 2013 from 31.2 million up to 35.2 million, but their market share fell from 13.4 to 11.9. So they ship more, but market share shrank. So that's just how Android is they're rolling.
And what
Becoming a juggernaut.
the point that we sort of stumbled into there is that a lot of people think Android is Google, but that's not true. Google comes out with the first release, and then they open it in the Android open source project, and then it becomes its own thing. And if Google goes away, if they decide to stop doing it, I don't know why they would. Maybe they get sued out of it. It's still out there, and other people can still develop it, and you don't have to wait. I mean, you could look at what CyanogenMod is doing. They're going in their own direction. They're racing with Google now instead of running behind Google. And,
Yeah, even Amazon.
yeah, Amazon's doing the same thing, and other companies are going to do this. The genie is out of the bottle. When this consortium met in, I think, 2005 it was, and said let's create an open handset, everybody kind of laughed at them. And when the G1 came out, everybody did laugh at them. But then it got way better, and now it is the smartphone market. It depends on the marketing you listen to. I mean, the people I know, they don't say Android. I say, do you have an Android phone? They don't know what that means. Do you have a Samsung phone? Oh yeah, I've got a Samsung phone. Or do you have an HTC phone? Oh yeah, I've got that. Do you have an iPhone? No. Do you have a smartphone? Yes. Then you have Android. It's a simple float sheet.
Right.
But
Well, and all this talk about Samsung, their numbers actually shrank from a year ago. They went from 76 to 74.5 million. So all the other in the top 5, their numbers actually increased.
All right, and the last one I want to do, just because it's near and dear to my heart, is Duke Nukem just won't die
Of course not.
because he's Duke.
That's right.
Well, this was kind of an interesting story, and this is from The Verge. Library of Congress, as someone who works there, says they have found the source code for a never released Duke Nukem game. And this has to do with, copyright. So they like send it to the Library of Congress so they can say, yes, it's here and prove it. But Duke Nukem, their latest handheld game, Critical Mass, which was apparently
2011.
well, no, but it was apparently quite garbage.
Well,
it was
on the
bad.
Nintendo
And-
franchise, it was bad. The PSP version was supposed to be amazing. Of course, it was supposed to be. The next version is always supposed to be amazing.
Right.
But the PSP version never came out.
Right, but then, but apparently, it was just, it came out. It was just never released. So, I'm sorry. I just went totally blank here, and my stupid Shockwave player has crashed.
So I was a Duke
Yeah.
Nukem guy all the way back on my 386 SX, back in the
Nice.
day. And it was a 2D side-scrolling first-person shooter. Well, it couldn't be first-person, huh? Side-scrolling shooter. And then the Duke Nukem Forever was, 12 or 13 years in development, and it was supposed to be the Halo version of Duke Nukem, and it came out and it was bad. And then so it's like, well, let's move to the handheld market. So the Nintendo DS had the Duke Nukem Critical Mass, and it was, it wasn't terrible. It just wasn't awesome. And then they were going to do a PSP version, which has more guts than the Nintendo DS, has more power. It was a better graphics engine. It was supposed to be better, but they just sort of ran out of steam and said, maybe Duke Nukem won't live forever.
Right. Well, and the thing, even though it was kind of the same title, it had like kind of different content.
Right.
So if you think back to Ghost Recon, for the PlayStation 2 was different than Ghost Recon for the Xbox 360, but they were the same title.
Right.
So this was the same kind of thing. It's the same game, but it's different. And so, other software that has been lost through the ages might be in the bowels of the Library of Congress somewhere. So to Washington, everyone.
I'm not sure I want to talk about the bowels of Congress, but
But the Library of Congress.
So, yeah, I'm not even going to go there. I was going to talk about copyright law in the U.S., which is interesting because the moment you create it, you have a copyright, but to be able to defend that copyright, there has to be a canonical representation of that somewhere, and the Library of Congress has become the place. So they just sent them a CD and said, we created this. Here's proof that we created it. You received it on this date. And so it's there, and the Library of Congress owns it because you kind of have to, I don't know, not really surrender your rights, but give them the rights to it when you do that. With local musicians, we call that the poor man copyright.
Yes. You take a copy of your cassette tape with your demo on it,
you
mail it to the Library of Congress.
Yeah, back in the 90s or whatever it was mail it to yourself because you got that postmark.
Right, that too.
That doesn't, found out that doesn't hold up in court at all anymore. But, okay, so that's it. We only had time for a few news stories. We decided we were getting super news heavy, and that was part of what was making the show go so super long. I think we need to break out and do a whole news show at this. We need to just have a whole separate news show that may or may not be Linux related, like this show may or not be Linux related.
Hey, you guys filled your Linux quota, so the next 3 or 4 episodes, no more Linux.
Episodes, months. We could go 16 episodes and never mention the word Linux, and we're covered. We're good here. So let's move on to the pirated dev/random section of the show. Seth, what do you have to bring down our productivity this week?
Okay. I just thought this was an awesome site, but you can go to driveatank.com and actually sign up, and they have different packages that involved firing machine guns that are really big noise, and you can actually drive a tank over a minivan and destroy it. There are different packages available from, some of them are on the cheap, just several $100s. Some of them where you're actually driving the tank and smashing over stuff can be up to a few thousand. But driveatank.com. I just think this is awesome, and I really, really, really want to do it.
Have you seen the ads of Arnold Schwarzenegger driving a tank over stuff? I don't even remember what it was.
That was my link a few months ago now.
Yeah. So I always, it's just so cool. I want the 5-star commander in chief is the high package. I want the 7-star global domination one to be driving a tank with Arnold Schwarzenegger.
There you go.
Right.
Seth,
Jonathan, what it was a
say...
fundraiser to raise money for something, and you had to buy into a raffle, and the winner was getting flown out to California and was going to hang out with Arnold and drive a tank over stuff. So it's been a couple of months ago now.
The single car crush, the double car crush, the mobile home destruction.
Seth, when you were sitting in your seat in front of your computer, I need to know the term you searched that pulled this up. What were you sitting in your chair thinking? I've always wanted to crush a car in a tank.
No, actually, I have about 15 or 20 different sites that I scroll through for news.
Yeah.
And I just, I go to that folder and I right click and I open all in tabs. And as I'm going through them, sometimes I chase rabbits with some of the links on the sidebars of the things. This was one of them. And I was like, dude, this is a Seth's link right here.
Yeah, so for $400, that's the cheapest one you actually get to drive something. The 3-star lieutenant general, you can ride on a 5-ton transport drive an FV433 Abbott SPG, I don't know what that means, and fire a machine gun.
SPG is self-propelled gun.
Okay.
So it's like a tank, but the turret doesn't move. It's in the Saving Private Ryan, if you remember that movie, the German thing with the big long barrel that was a self-propelled gun. So
Okay.
it's a lot like a tank, but it's not a tank.
And then
So
if you
they probably wouldn't have a problem if I, paid the $400 or $500 to drive a tank. Then
no, just keep it straight. Yeah.
yeah,
And then for add-on, so it's $399 for that package. For another $600, you can crush a car. For
Nice,
another $800, you can crush 2 cars.
I would love to. I want to, like, maybe if I go up there with a trailer with 2 cars on it and say, you can have both of these cars if you let me drive the tank over one of them.
And if
I
you
think
know
barter would
somebody in your life, a dad who's retiring or something, and you want to give them that big gift, this is not terribly pricey. I mean, this is $600-700. I mean, it's a lot, right? But for a once in a lifetime thing, for the right person, this is the thing. And their 5-star Commander in Chief package is $3,000. Get to ride on a 5-ton transport, drive the self-propelled gun, drive an APC. Seth, help me out.
And an SPG.
Armored personnel carrier.
Armored
Armored personnel carrier. Drive a Russian tank, crush a car with the tank, fire 4 machine guns, fire the Barrett 50 cal, and go to their gift shop. I hope someday my kids pitch in to buy me that $3,000 thing. They'd have to wedge me in with a shoehorn, but I want to drive a tank over a car.
I think this would be awesome. We need to I don't know, do a Kickstarter program for the Element Opie staff to
We'll
drive
do a
the tank.
podcast from inside an armored personnel carrier.
That would
Right,
be
so-
awesome.
So Jerry, if you're still listening and you really want to show some love for me, just email me with the package you purchased for me.
All right.
Sorry.
And if you, like Jerry, would like to make your voice heard, good or bad, as you can see, I don't discriminate. Well, I totally do discriminate. I ripped him apart, but I still let you be on the show. You can go to elementop.com, click the Contact Us button at the top of the page that I'm pretty sure works with the Orca screen reader, and it'll let you fill out a form. It'll send me an email, or if you just want to skip it and fire up Mutt and send me an email via the command line, you can do that, edl@elementop.com, or if you want to be on the show, not like Jonathan was, but in a shorter format, you can dial 559-IM-OPI and leave us a voicemail on our Google Voice line, and we'll play that on the air. We love all of those things. We love hearing from you. And if you have solid criticisms, great, bring them on. If you just want to be a raving lunatic, even better, because we can make a lot of fodder out of that one. So
Definitely.
that's where you can do that. Also, don't forget the forums. We can't let the show end without talking about Sharknado 2. Seth, did you watch it?
Dude, it was awesome. It was everything that was good about the first one, but more of it. There was a litany of semi-famous B, C, D, E, and F list actors appearing throughout the whole movie. It was awesome.
Yeah, I watched it on the rebroadcast. I didn't get to see the original broadcast. I watched the rebroadcast like the next day or 2 days later. And I got to say, I didn't like it as much as the original Sharknado. Maybe because it was obvious they were trying. In the first one, you could pass it off as, this is so bad, I can't believe they didn't realize this. But on the second one, it was obvious they did realize it. And it took some of the fun out of it for me.
But it was even more hammy.
Oh, it was terrible, yeah.
So
isn't
it
the
was a
point of
great
those
bad
movies?
movie.
Yeah, I mean, Judd Hirsch as the taxi driver was just, that was all I needed. That's the right name, isn't it, Judd Hirsch?
Yes.
Yeah. It was great, and he got eaten, of course, because you have to. Everybody gets eaten in that show.
Did you see Wesley Crusher? He got ate at the very beginning.
I missed that one. I was putting.
He didn't have any words. He was just looking in the plane, and when the shark flew down the aisle and
That's
it
awesome.
took his head off.
Yeah, and the sharks were meaner in this one. They were like guided missiles aiming for people. It was great.
Well, because it's New York, and New
Right.
York's meaner than L.A.
Yeah. Even the Sharknadoes. That was actually one of the lines. Even the shark. And the thing with Matt Lauer and the weather guy,
Al Roker,
Al Roker, where Al Roker kept referring, or Matt Lauer kept referring to him as weather events, and Al Roker kept saying Sharknado. And it was funny. That it was good. So
And the girl reporter who basically they looped that scene in twice. It's raining. It's raining like 0.5 sharks an hour or something
that
like
was
that.
awesome.
It was the exact same dialogue 2 times in a row.
which is what the Weather Channel does. So yeah, it was fun. I didn't feel it was as fun as the first one, but it was good. And you know, we got to go see the big budget release of Super Cyclone, which is called Into the Storm. I swear it's exactly the same plot as Super Cyclone from the commercials. I think the guys who made Super Cyclone heard about this one and decided to rush out and get one done using plywood props.
Nice.
You think they could afford plywood?
There was definitely some plywood there. Some of it even had paint on it. Not all of it. All right. So if you want to contribute to the bad movie talk, you can do that over in the forums at elementop.com. And we appreciate all of the feedback from our community. You're not just an audience, you're a community, and we appreciate that. And Jonathan, thanks for being on the show. Any final words, any one last thing? If nobody heard anything else, the whole hour and a half of the show, they just tuned in for this, what's the one thing you want them to hear you say?
If you know someone that has a disability and needs access to a computer, sonargnulinux.com.
There you go.
You have to use GNU Linux, really?
Yes, I wanted to make your eyes roll in the back of your head.
It hurt me. I felt pain. I really did. Chris, Seth, as always, thanks for being with us. Jonathan, thanks for being such a great guest.
Hey, thanks for having me on.
And I'm going to say that ends this episode of Everyday Linux.
Bye.
See ya.
See ya.
All right, good stuff.
That was a great show.
It was.
Now, Mark, do you want me to export this as like a WAV or MP3? Like, what do you prefer?
MP3 is fine.
Okay.
Yeah, waves are just too dang big.
Yeah.
Let's see. I didn't mean to stop this, but apparently I did, so okay. Give it a quick listen, make sure I got all of it.
So should I misnumber this one again? I think it'd be fun to do it a whole bunch of days in a row.
Yeah. I didn't even notice. YouTube viewers, I saw one of you just took off. You didn't get to hear. See, there was a super magic thing I was about to say. Oh, now he's back, so never mind. I can't. Thanks for hanging out with us, and we'll see you next week on whatever the name of this show is.